Hi, this is The Business Guy. I'm the CEO of the Lawyers Limited Law Firm, and today I'm going to share with you how to disappear from public records and avoid lawsuits legally. So let me ask you this. Do you know what's in the public records with your name all over it? Because if you don't, you could be a sitting duck for shady lawyers, shakedown artists, or frivolous lawsuits. In fact, there are people in this country whose full-time job it is to look in the public records for deep pockets to make them targets of lawsuits for their own financial gain. So by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how to protect your assets, maintain your privacy, and avoid becoming a target yourself. So stick around because this is going to be a game changer for you. And if you find this information valuable, remember to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so we can see each other again. Let's dive in. So let's talk about the public record problem and what they can see. So let's start with the basics, the public record. And this is where anyone, yes, anyone with a working computer and an internet connection can go online and find out what you own. It's like an open book. And if you're not careful, it's the first place that predatory lawyers and plaintiffs will look to decide if you're worth targeting. So what is the public record? Let's break it down. So here are 5 things that are either in the public records or can be subpoenaed in a lawsuit. So number 1, real estate. Now this is a big one. If you own property, your name is likely tied to it in public records. I can look up your name in any county recorder's office in the U.S. and see every property you own. In fact, it amazes many clients when they're on the phone with us and we start reading out addresses of properties they own. And trust me, this is the first thing that a plaintiff's attorney will do or a contingency fee attorney will do if you get into a car wreck. So we put real estate into separate land trusts. And then on the rental properties, we make separate LLCs the beneficiaries of those land trusts. So you have privacy of ownership, and then you have the asset protection and liability protection of the LLCs. So for real estate, we use land trusts and LLCs, and we also use equity stripping. And with equity stripping, we record equity stripping line of credit liens against the properties to pull the equity out, and that can later be turned into cash if needed. So let me give you an example. We had a client who was sued along with their sibling over a business dispute. So both were equally responsible. But here's the kicker. Our client had their assets protected through anonymous structures, land trusts, LLCs. And we also set up the most powerful tool of them all, a Cook Islands trust. Now the sibling didn't. And guess what? The plaintiff dropped our client early on and went after the sibling for years. Why? Because they could see what the sibling owned and they couldn't see what our client owned. So that's the power of anonymity. One other reason, now this just popped into my head, one other reason to subscribe to this channel is you want to subscribe to one or more people who can help make you money, and also consider subscribing to this channel so we can help you keep your money, because what's the point in making it if it slips through your fingers in a lawsuit? So number 2, let's talk about vehicles. Now I'm not too worried about vehicles. Why? Because cars don't drive themselves. The liability usually falls on the driver plus the owner of the vehicle. Now sure, the car might be in the public records, but it's not usually a primary target for lawsuits to seize the car itself. That is, most cars are not assets that lawyers want to take because most used cars don't bring in a big haul for the lawyer, depending on the vehicle, of course, compared to real estate and bank accounts. So number 3 thing we want to protect is bank accounts. Now, generally, bank accounts aren't publicly visible, but if you're in a lawsuit, discovery can reveal your bank. And if your name is on those accounts, you're exposed. And that's why we always recommend using legal entities such as LLCs, especially Wyoming LLCs. Now, for advanced asset protection, if you have larger amounts, say larger than $500,000 or $250,000, I think, bare minimum, and high liability, the strategy we use at our firm is to set up an offshore LLC in the Cook Islands, and we hold that LLC inside of a Cook Islands asset protection trust to hold your accounts instead of holding your bank accounts in your own name. So we do this because U.S. courts don't have jurisdiction over our Cook Islands law firm that serves as trustee. And our firm has set up more Cook Islands trusts than anyone in the world because they simply work. And we have lots of videos on our channel about Cook Islands trusts if you want to find out more. So number 4 is investment accounts. Investment accounts. Now, similar to bank accounts, investment accounts aren't publicly visible. But again, if your name is on them, they're fair game in a lawsuit. stock market portfolios can grow into tremendous sums over time. So they're a big, juicy target for lawyers in lawsuits. So number 5 is business ownership. And this is where people get into trouble. Most states require you to list the owners or manager of an LLC in the public records. If you own multiple businesses, that's a treasure trove of information for anybody looking to sue you. And here's a real life example. We had a landlord client in northern Florida whose tenant trashed their rental property and they left the bathtub running that flooded part of the property. And then they sued the landlord for damage. Now, during the lawsuit, the plaintiff's attorney looked up where our client, the landlord, lived and said, hey, they live in an expensive neighborhood and they can afford to settle. Had our client protected their assets beforehand, they never would have been targeted in the first place because the lawyer couldn't have found the properties. Okay, now as promised, the power of anonymity and how to disappear from the public records. So now that you know what's in the public records, we'll talk about how to get your name out of it. The key is anonymity. Number 1 is anonymous business entities. One of the best ways to protect your assets is by using anonymous business entities. For example, you set up a Wyoming LLC. We set up thousands of them, and you don't have to list the name of the owners in the public records. You can then use that Wyoming LLC to own other entities or assets. Now, here's how it works. Let's say you have a Florida LLC, okay? Now, instead of listing your name as the owner or the manager of that LLC, you can list a Wyoming LLC as the manager of that LLC. For the Wyoming LLC, we have our nominee manager stand in for you in the public records. We have a Wyoming virtual office for you, an address for you. And now your name is nowhere to be found in the public records, and you have full ownership and control. Number 2, land trusts. And again, we set up thousands of land trusts. Another powerful tool is the land trust. And a land trust separates the legal ownership of the property from the beneficial use. So we use this a lot for real estate investors. For example, we put a property into a land trust and make the beneficiary an LLC, and that way nobody can tie the property back to you. For your personal residence, we put into a land trust only without the associated LLC typically, and that way you can retain your tax benefits that you get as a homeowner, which is a separate tax bucket than owning rental properties. The tax categories are different. So that's why we don't use an LLC associated with a land trust for your personal residence. So number 3 is an offshore trust, particularly a Cook Islands trust is our favorite. Now this is where we shine. A Cook Islands trust is one of the strongest asset protection tools in the world. And here's how it works. Now, we created Cook Islands LLC. We place it inside the Cook Islands Trust, and you're the manager of the LLC, so you maintain control of your assets. You're the signatory in the bank accounts and so on. But here's the kicker. If you ever are under legal attack and the judge could order you to bring the money back and give it to your opponent, our licensed bonded trustee law firm can step in to protect you. So let me give you an example. We had a client who was a successful doctor. He was sued for malpractice, and the plaintiff's attorney thought that he had hit the jackpot. So when they discovered that his assets were protected by a Cook Islands trust with the LLC inside, they dropped the case. Why? Because they knew they'd get nothing. Okay, now let's talk about some real-life case studies. Let me share a few stories to show you how this works in the real world. So case study number 1, the business owner's close call. We had a client who owned a chain of successful restaurants, and then one day a customer slipped and fell on one of his locations. Now, the injury was minor, but the lawsuit was anything but. The plaintiff's attorney dug into his public records and discovered he owned multiple properties and businesses, and they immediately inflated the claim, suing for triple the amount his insurance would cover, hoping for a big payout. Now, here's where our planning paid off. Our client had already placed his restaurants and properties into separate LLCs. We had recorded equity stripping liens against the business payable to an anonymous LLC, and then his liquid assets were owned by a Cook Islands trust. When the plaintiff's attorney realized they couldn't easily access his assets, they dropped the case, and our client settled for a fraction of what they were originally demanding. Case study number 2, the doctor's divorce. Another client was a highly successful surgeon. His wife had died years before, and he was snake charmed into remarrying a young gold digger. He was going through a contentious divorce with her, and his spouse's attorney was aggressively pursuing his assets, including his medical practice, real estate, and investments. And fortunately, our client had set up a Cook Islands trust years earlier with his investments held inside of an LLC that we put inside the trust. Now, we put equity stripping liens on his home and investment real estate and his practice, and then the divorce proceedings began The spouse's attorney quickly realized they couldn't touch his assets. They were protected by the trust and all the structures we had set up. Then the case quickly settled, and our client retained control of his hard-earned wealth. Case study number 3, the real estate investor's shield. Now, one of our clients was a real estate investor with a portfolio of 20 rental properties. A tenant in one of his buildings filed a lawsuit claiming unsafe living conditions. Now, the tenant's attorney thought they hit the jackpot when they saw where the investor lived. But here's the twist. Our client had placed each property into a separate land trust, with the beneficiaries being separate anonymous LLCs. The attorney couldn't tie the properties together or determine the full extent of the investor's wealth. So the case was dismissed early, and our client avoided what could have been a costly legal battle. Okay, now let's talk about what you can actually do, actionable steps, and how to protect yourself today. So now that you've seen the power of anonymity, let's talk about what you can do right now to protect yourself. Step number 1 is audit your public records. Start by looking up your name in your county's public records and see what's out there. Or if you become a client, we can do this for you. Step number 2, use anonymous entities. We set up anonymous LLCs in states like Wyoming or Nevada, and then we set up these entities to own your assets. We typically have nominee officers or directors or managers for these entities, so your name doesn't show up. Then we have a virtual office address in, let's say, Wyoming, so your address doesn't appear on the public records associated with the company. Step number 3, we create land trusts. If you own real estate, put each into separate land trusts. In fact, we've set up thousands of them. And then we make the beneficiaries of each land trust separate anonymous LLCs so that one lawsuit on one property doesn't take all of your properties. Step number 4 is to set up an offshore trust, say a Cook Islands trust in particular. I've been setting up trusts there for nearly 30 years. So for the ultimate asset protection, set up a Cook Islands trust. We put a Cook Islands LLC inside the trust, and then we make you the manager. If you're ever under legal attack, our law firm trustee will step in to protect you. And number 4, stay off social media when you're on vacation. Now, this might sound unrelated, but it's not. We've seen cases where burglars target professional athletes or other wealthy people's homes because they post their locations on social media. So don't make it easy for people to find you and the assets that you have. Limit what you post online and the assets in your house. So use your own judgment and your own discretion, but use discretion. At least you can post your vacation photos when you get back home. So if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this: anonymity is your best defense against lawsuits and financial predators. Don't wait until it's too late to protect your assets. And if you are ready to take the next step, we'd be glad to help you. We've been doing this for over 30 years, and we've helped thousands of clients just like you. So leave a comment or question below. Feel free to visit assetprotectionplanners.com and fill out a consultation form. Thanks for watching. And if you found this video helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with somebody who might need it, and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time. Stay protected.